Hello, everyone, and welcome to Educause's Demo Day Applications of AI. Just a reminder that this is a webinar environment, and so you'll want to use the chat to share your comments and add your questions, especially your favorite song. As you're doing so, be sure to select everyone from the drop-down menu so that we all can see your questions and comments. If you need closed captioning, please select the CC at the bottom of the screen. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Marcus.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. So quick introductions. My name is Marcus. I'm one of the owners, founder of Harmonize, and we'll be running the presentation today. I also have three folks with me because the numbers have been high in some of these webinars. We want to make sure we have your questions answered in chat as well. So I have Eric, David, and Alan with me who will be in the chat answering questions. They all have deep knowledge of what we're doing here, so they'll be able to get those up, and then they can queue up questions for me if they are relevant to what I'm doing. They'll interrupt me, and otherwise we'll take a whole bunch of questions and queue them up at the end. I guess to get started, if people don't mind, since we're in the chat now, can you throw kind of what your role is at your institution, what your job title or whatever it is, so that I can make sure I'm customizing what we're talking about for who's actually in the audience. So I know if I'm talking to all instructors or am I talking to directors of assessment at that level. If you don't mind, toss that out in the chat, and that way I can get a feel for what's going on. And I should have realized with 100 people, that might be a very quick scrolling list. But while you're doing that, I'm going to jump quick into an introduction of Harmonize as a product. I'm going to go straight into demo, no slide deck, and then we're going to pivot into the AI realm on top of it. So I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes orient you to what Harmonize is, so you have the context to understand what is the AI layer that's on top of this, because I think some of the most power comes from taking an existing product, put an AI helper layer for folks on top of it, and be able to roll from there. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start the demonstration in Canvas. We do work in the 4 main LMSs, Blackboard, Canvas, D2L, and Moodle. So shortly here, I will jump out of Canvas and open it in a new window. So for those that are not Canvas folks, don't get distracted by looking at Canvas. But what Harmonize is a collaboration tool set that plugs into your LMS. So think better online discussions, better assignments, PDF annotations, chat, Q&A forums, whatever type of engagement point you need for your students. So when your students come in, instead of facing a lot of text, which is really easy for ChatGPT to answer, instead they are both seeing prompts written or recorded or screen shared from their instructor, and then they have the same tools available to them as well. So here's one of our discussion forums where we have set up multiple due dates for the students to come in more often, and then the instructor is able to put some presence in there to be able to record instructions, run polls for their students. And then you'll see me reference this a lot, but we are really into the multimodal aspect of things. So each of the student submissions and whatever type of communication we're doing is coming in as a specific card, where it's really easy for them to leverage media if they click on one of these cards, so they can see they're recording videos, they are uploading graphs, etc. And we've been doing this for about 5, 6 years, something along those lines. So a lot of schools have come for this type of functionality, to where they can move away from text-only discussions, especially now that ChatGPT is able to sort of crush the text-only instructions and the writing as that goes. So when we're looking at all of this, it's like, how do we make it easy for students to be able to author that? We do have Turnitin integration, so you can do the AI detection, but there's a long debate about whether that's functional or workable. Instead, we try to encourage people to do things that are multimedia submissions. Where the AI layer comes in, and I'll go ahead and start demoing some of this, is that when we look at the data, we see that instructors often struggle to create what are really compelling prompts for their students. I realized I actually just walked through the demo of this and set it up, so that was a little embarrassing, but okay. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a prompt, because what we found is the instructors have crushing their subject matter expertise, right? They know what it is they want to teach, but when they go to build an assignment or a discussion activity for their students, the first step we want to help with AI is, can we help them build an instruction prompt that encourages more of the authentic assessment that we want to see, so that we can naturally sidestep some of the ChatGPT stuff. But being able to train instructors and all of that is quite difficult, and timing and everything along those lines. So what we're asking instructors to do instead is to just give us the description as the subject matter expert, what it is that they want to teach. So let's say that I'm in a personal finance class and I'm trying to teach budgeting, and I want my students to pick a savings goal that is important to them. I want them to respond with visuals and screen share and imagery, their choice type of thing. So we're really trying to let the instructor stay in their lane of subject matter expertise with some guidance in terms of what they want to actually teach. And then we ask for them to say, okay, give us your learning objective so that we can help you line up your learning objective to make sure the assignment is supporting that. And we also let them pick, if they are familiar with it, an actual Bloom's taxonomy level. So we're basing this firmly in learning science to say, okay, we know what a good discussion prompt looks like from the textbooks for the given Bloom's level. And we now know what you want to teach, and we know what your learning objective is. So built into your LMS, can we go ahead and just build an activity for you? We want to be able to have some quick interactions with the instructor here. Our whole goal is to keep the instructor in the loop on each of the tools that I'm going to show you, because it's very important that they have edit rights to this, that they have the final review word. So maybe they look at this and they're like, that wasn't great, try something different. And so we can really get closer to what they want to do by pulling out textbook examples of what makes a good online activity, what makes a good discussion prompt. And once they get close enough, they can, of course, iterate just like they would with ChatGPT if they were out on a login page to be able to come in and make this their own. But the whole goal is to get them close enough that they can edit what they want to do here and make a few final tweaks before they present it to their students. So the whole goal is to get them to be able to say, I'm comfortable enough to add this to my topic instructions, at which point I could edit point 3, edit point 4, and then getting back to that sort of that multimodal aspect, we're really encouraging instructors to be able to say, record an introduction video and be like, hey, everybody, this is what we're going to teach. This is what we're going to talk about. These are some of the guidelines I'm looking for. There are a lot of details in the instructions, that type of information, so that there's good instructor presence coupled with the textbook assignment as we're going into it. And then we record that. And then we auto caption all the videos and everything as we're going through, so that you don't have to worry about an accessibility standpoint as well. So you can see we even added in proper headings for the different things for them as they're going through, add the video, auto caption the video. And now we're ready to present that to the student. However, enter the next step for AI. The other thing we're looking at is like, well, okay, now we have a good activity for the instructors to participate in with their students, and we have all these multimodal tools to be able to let the students express themselves in whatever way they want. But how do we also help with grading from, let's say we really want more rubrics to be present in our assignments. We really wish that all instructors were using rubrics so that we can actually line those rubrics up to outcomes and actually do proper assessment of both the courses, but also for the students, and to help with some of that bias that can sometimes creep into grading. So once the instructor has built the instructions that they want, we give them another place where they can actually say, you know what, yeah, start to build a rubric for me. And so what we're doing here is that we're using AI to look at their instructions, look at their learning outcomes, and help them build a rubric. So the first step is trying to pull out the main 4 themes that we think they're asking their students to do from a success perspective, so that we know very clearly this is what success looks like for your students. And then we want to keep the instructor in the loop. I think this is one of the most important pieces here of anytime you're generating text or any information, all tools should really focus on this. Like, how do we walk the instructor through reviewing the material? So here we now have what we've picked out as the 4 main things we think the student should focus on. However, the instructor has the ability to edit these, delete them if they disagree with them, add additional ones if they want. And this is starting to build the process of a rubric that is not generic at all. This is not a, we're going to gauge you on critical thinking. We're going to assess you on that. This is, what is the budgeting and savings goal strategy that you developed when you were actually building this response to this assignment? And when you did your presentation, how much did you actually convey the information well? All of these types of things, so that we have something that's very, very customized to this assignment. And once the instructor is happy with that, once again, we continue to walk them through that process to say, okay, next, I want to go ahead and generate the full rubric. And now we're going to build the 4x4 rubric for them. Once again, keeping them in the loop as we go. Nikki, I see your hand is raised.
No, we're good.
Okay, sorry. Um, all right, so now it's going to present once again what all of the information to the instructor, where they can then review it and see what did we decide that excellence means for that identification and strategy side of things, with little pencil icons for them to be able to edit everything, to be able to make this their own once again, and then they save the rubric. So now we have a well-written instructions prompt. Now we have a rubric based on that instruction prompt, and the student can view the full rubric. And when they publish this, we are actually taking this and putting this back into Canvas so that it becomes a full-blown Canvas rubric. So if I were to reload this page, I actually click the reload button, you'll see that now we have a full-blown Canvas rubric associated with this, so that it appears in SpeedGrader, so that it can be linked up to the course learning outcomes, so that we can have a full map of what our curriculum looks like. In the other LMSs other than Canvas, we make these available for grading. The other LMSs don't yet have a way to be able to write a rubric back in. Once they do, though, we will add that functionality as well. So now you can see I have an assignment set up where I have, both a initial post and a peer connectivity side of things set up with different deadlines to be able to pull those students back in. I have that activity written, have that video recorded, and then I have a full rubric that the student can view, even if they're not inside of the Canvas window. And then they can go ahead and start creating their new posts here using all those tools we were talking about: recording video, doing screen share directly into the LMS, pulling in nice visuals, even drawing on visuals and timestamp commentary on videos, so that the instructions now tell the students how to answer things in ways that are difficult for ChatGPT to answer. So we're really trying to focus on that authenticity inside of the online classroom. Now that we've built all of this, the next step, which I'm going to jump in and log in as a student for. Actually, Alan, any questions that you think I should answer while I'm getting set up and logged in as a student here?
No, we've had a couple questions and we've been able to answer.
All right, excellent. Rolling through this pretty quick, but then we can come back and revisit any parts of it as well. But I wanted to make sure we got through all of this before we have time to be able to dive into things as well. All right, so I'm coming into another assignment that I already have set up with the rubric, and now I'm logged in as a student. A couple notifications for me as a student of things I should be accomplishing. You can see here I have an assignment set up. I have a rubric set up. And the difference now is that I, as the instructor, have chose to enable my students to be able to receive direct AI feedback, not written feedback, but AI feedback based around the rubric I have defined as an instructor. So I'm going to spend a little bit talking about what this means before I go into demo mode of it, which is as a goal, we don't want to tell students what they've done wrong necessarily. We don't want to just hand them a list and be like, please fix these things as you go through. We want them instead to be able to stop and think. Think about what the instructor asked for. Think about what the instruction said. Think about what the rubric said. Think about how you're doing on that rubric, so we can teach a little bit of self-assessment as we're going through. And so if the instructor chooses, we can handle that process for them with AI. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to go ahead and create a new post in response to what I'm working on here. This is my mediocre response to your assignment. I'll call it that anyway. I'm going to go grab some sample assignment that I've written here. Can add that text in. If I were doing a little more thorough demo here, I could go ahead and maybe, kick on screen share here, kick on audio recording, kick on video recording, add in supporting resources, links, if that's what the instructor's rubric is choosing. But front and center now, the student has this ability before they publish the post to be able to view AI feedback on this post. So if the student chooses to click this button here, we are now going to take the instructor's rubric, take the instructions, take everything the student has done to date before they submit it, and we're going to offer them feedback on how they've done so far. So we're going to reload that rubric for them, and we're actually going to tell them, given that rubric, look, your concept analysis, there's very little room for improvement there. Your clarity and articulation and your scenario development, actually just the clarity here, there's some room for improvement. Like, you could still do a little bit better there. Your peer engagement, there's a lot of room for improvement, which makes sense because I, as a student, haven't shifted into commenting mode yet. So it goes ahead and expands that out for me as the main area that maybe I should focus on as the weakest part. But I, as a student, can come back and be like, what did the rubric say for clarity and articulation? Got it. And just like with a math quiz, if I get graded taking a math quiz, it'll tell me which ones I could use to improve on. I can go back and do that. Now we can do that for written assignments. So I can scroll back up here, take a look at what I'm doing. I can come, I have a slight improvement to this assignment here in another window. Let me grab that. So I'm like, you know what, it wanted clarity and articulation. I'm realizing that I didn't actually do this section very thoroughly. I can go ahead and do a broader concept analysis there and improve what I'm doing. And I can come back down and then I can rescan my work. And we will go through the same process again. However, this time now, instead of just telling them where they could use improvement, we're actually going to show them also trend lines of how are you doing on your second attempt. Are you getting better? Looks like I didn't get tons better here, so I didn't do enough improvement for that. Must have copied the wrong part of my my scenario here. Let me go ahead and grab more of it and replace the whole assignment. Just trying to be sophisticated, but I didn't actually read the assignment that was written. So I can rescan the work here. And then we'll be able to see, did I do an actual better job in particular areas? Like I made some changes that time. It didn't really drive the needle that much as I were going through. They can repeat this process as often as they want. Now you can see my clarity actually went up. You can see the trend line is pointing upward. I still need a lot of peer engagement, but that makes sense because I haven't commented as well. I've driven all of these particular rubric criteria up to the point where there's very little room for improvement. We never want to say no room for improvement because there's always some room for improvement as we're going through, but then they could publish this and move on. So the idea is to give them time to stop and think, make them spend more time with the content, and do so in a way where they can do it without penalty. They can do it in real time without having to wait for the feedback cycle for the instructor. And then when the instructor receives the assignment, we will show them the student used the scanner. They used it 3 times. They got better as they were going through it. So then the instructor can assess the student growth. The instructor can also tell the areas that they were initially weak in, and then they can step in as the human being and really add that touch to it of like, okay, now I as a human and stepping in, I'm going to do the actual assessment and grading. This is not actually doing grading. This is just steering them towards the areas of the rubric that they need to do improvement with. And then continuing on. So this instructor could make this a requirement that they want them to do. They can make it optional. And of course, they don't have to use it at all if they don't want to. We always like to leave the power of how much of this structure are they putting in place for the instructor to choose. Okay, Alan, any questions that you feel like I should field at this point before we sort of talk about some of the different directions we're taking the AI in, where we think we can go next with it, and then I can come back and demo some different pieces of this in more detail.
Go ahead, Marcus. We're getting to the questions now.
Excellent. All right, so when we think about what's ethical with AI and where we're going, a lot of, just to be clear, a lot of our stuff is driven by what do our faculty want, what do our customers want. We do voting rounds on this to see what is the next step that is reasonable. Some of the ideas that we're working with and fleshing out and talking to our customers about is a couple different routes, right? One of them is, could we actually present more information as a grading assistant to the instructor? So that we can say, okay, they went through 3 rounds of improvement. Here's why we suggested they improve more here. Here's how we think it got better, so that the instructor has more of a roadmap to look at and zoom in on where in these sort of formative assignments they think the student could use more help. So can we save some instructor time there? Ethical considerations on that, we have to be really careful not to bias the instructor to a particular point that the AI found. We really need to make sure that there's space for the instructor to be able to do proper assessment and be that human in the classroom where they are the final arbiter of what success looks like as we go through. So we're going to have to walk that very carefully, but that's one area that we have the data for already, and can we figure out what is ethical to show and what is proper to show to the instructors. Some of the other things we're looking at is that when we just built that rubric for the instructor, we actually know the activity and what Bloom's taxonomy level it was. If the student goes through this coaching process and perhaps doesn't do super well, we can offer them a remediation activity that's maybe 1 step down the Bloom's category, or maybe we offer them a private reflection assignment to be able to work through and work with the material a bit more. We'll call it personalized-ish learning because we are not trying to tie it to who the human being is and what their interests are, but we are could tie it to where they're actually at in terms of how they performed on the rubric, and or based on how they actually did grading, we could attach different activities to the different aspects of this, so the instructor can make a map and say, well, if they're really weak on concept analysis of this, maybe they need to go do this exercise over here. We'll make that extra credit. But because it's so quick to build these things, and because we can turn on auto grading for participation and we can turn on the rubric coach, the students could go into a loop where they are working without having to spend a lot of extra instructor time to be able to level up to come back into the natural flow of the classroom. So that's another area that we're looking at that would be relatively easy to do because we have all the building blocks in place as we're going along. The third piece that we're looking at is using AI is that a lot of times instructors will have built a lot of their module content, but they're not really sure what activity to build. Instead of even having to have them type in what it is they're trying to teach, we could scan their content in their LMS and then be able to make recommendations along this lines of, okay, well, here's an activity we could build. Is this what it looks like you're willing to teach? Maybe even go so far as to say, here's some possible course learning outcomes. Which of these seem appropriate for this activity that you're trying to achieve, so that your outcomes are well defined as you're going through it all. So that's kind of the direction we're trending of like how can we be sort of the assistant to the instructor so that we free up more time so the instructor can go in and be the human and do the actual teaching. And when we look at some of these things, we are actually being super careful in terms of what we will assess. We will actually label some of these things as this is something that a human is needed. If you're in an art class and you ask them to do a piece of art, and one of the rubric criteria is something that a AI can't tell yet, we will label it as such, and we will say that we're not even going to offer to coach on that. This is really where the instructor steps in at the feedback mechanism, either participating directly with these tools here or doing it via the grading scenario as well. All right. I just ran through tons of demo stuff there. I can go back and spend more time on the actual creation of the instructions. I can go into some of the Bloom's taxonomy support. If there are folks out there who are like, what are you doing with Bloom's? How does that line up? We can go play with that a little bit and talk through that. When we get into the rubric generation, we can spend a little more time looking like some of the different functionalities of different sort orders and how those appear in Canvas rubrics area, those types of questions. I'm happy to go into different areas and play in that line, but this was your super quick pass through how we are kind of building up the instructor with these tools so that they have better instructional content and so that the students have more real-time feedback. All right, Alan, what do you think of all of those? You've been monitoring the chat some.
Yeah, we've had about 8 questions, and I think we're caught up and clear.
Okay. I saw a few questions about video storage and such. Like, this doesn't count against the student's quota in Canvas. This is stored in Harmonize. We have unlimited storage. Storage is cheap nowadays, so we encourage people to do rich media. And when they're doing screen shares and stuff, they can record, if the instructor wants, up to an hour of video and screen share, so that we aren't inhibiting them because of technology limitations or desire for maximizing profit on storage or any of those things. We just really want the students to be expressing themselves how they're accustomed to, as opposed to having to stick to text, because that's the cheap way to do it.
And Marcus, one question you might want to speak to that just came in is, will the feedback work in discussions in addition to assignments?
It will, yeah. And the one that I was doing there, I just logged out as a student, but is actually a discussion forum. So I was showing this as making my initial post and getting feedback on that. Once I shift into commenting mode, I can go through that exact same process. So if I'm in the discussion and you have these problems where the students are doing superficial discussion responses, you can leverage this exact same tool. So part of the rubric can tell what they want, what you want from them from a peer engagement perspective, critical thinking, what points you're hoping they'll highlight, et cetera. We will go through that same AI feedback process when they're then writing their comments and tell them, like, you could still do quite a bit of improvement on peer engagement. Here's what the instructor said peer engagement should be about. So if they're writing, I agree with Bob, sure, that's quote unquote peer engagement, but it's not great peer engagement. And so if the rubric defines what peer engagement is, which this one does, and when I look at it, I can actually see what excellent peer engagement means. They're comprehensive, highly constructive. Feedback is specific, insightful, and significantly enhances the discussion. Multiple alternative concepts or methods are suggested with well-reasoned and thorough explanations. If they use our AI tool to scan their comment and they don't do those things, we're going to tell them. We can't make them do those things, but at the very least, we can point that that is something that they're not achieving. So if they are hoping to pursue a better grade, or if they are actually interested enough to accept that type of feedback, they can come through, see that, and then go back and revise their comments. And they can, once again, do that before they post them. So they don't have to put something out into the world that they're not proud of. They can solicit that either in draft mode, or after they post it, they can scan as well.
And Marcus, let's we got one question and then a demo request here. But can you use a universal design approach, and how would AI know that the faculty wants that approach?
Universal sort of design for learning, basically meaning you would like them to have multiple choices on how they're approaching things, how they are representing things. If that's what you mean by that question, then where we can and can't succeed is that if they are the thing we don't do yet, I should put a little asterisk next to it, is we don't scan video content and try to determine if it was a good video expression. We don't scan the content of images and try to see if they were representing themselves well via imagery and different expression types. So when the student is coming in and they're offered that choice, so they can kind of navigate and see how they want to learn, how do they want to approach it. Maybe the assignment has 3 different options. When we build the rubric for the assignment, the rubric is going to encompass all of those options. And the only way that we are going to bail out and not be able to support them is to say, well, if that particular option includes a lot of video and imagery, right now we're going to label that as human assessment needed, because we won't be able to offer feedback on that. But if you do offer them different approaches in these assignments with different student choice, we will represent that in the rubric, and then the rubric and the scan and the feedback mechanism can actually guide them down that path.
And Marcus, would you be able to show the reverse rating order?
Oh, and the rubrics? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let me come into the rubric I had built here. Let me come back in and go into update my rubric, and then come back into the actual rubric page where the reverse order is at. So by default, we line things up with an incrementing thing. It's a simple button click here to be able to say 3, 2, 5, 1 type of thing. And then we save this. We will present this to the student in this order. And if you're not in Canvas, even when you're grading, we will present it in this order. Canvas locks you into one of the orders. I don't remember which way it is when you're grading. So when you're in SpeedGrader, because we were putting this into the Canvas rubric, that reverse rating order won't persist through your grading mechanism. But most people want the reverse rating order because they want the students to read what is excellent first before they read what is poor as you go through. And we also kind of support that just inherently. Let me go ahead and save this guy here. We actually pull out in the description, clarity and articulation, kind of what success looks like to start with. So the very first thing the student reads is what success looks like before they have to dive into what can be overwhelming in terms of the 4x4 rubric and being able to read, okay, here's excellent versus here's poor as they go through. Right, and you can see here's where I actually turned on. This is all the instructor has to do to turn on the coaching, is to be like, no, I don't want coaching. Yes, I do want coaching as they're going through it all.
And Marcus, another question that came in here, if it's an existing rubric, we're asked, would we provide feedback? And of course we do not, but I think giving a good explanation of why would probably be helpful.
It's worthwhile to dig into because we looked at that. We do have the ability to do that, but the majority of that rubrics that get attached to assignments are fairly generic because people are reusing them from assignment to assignment to assignment, which is makes it hard to do proper coaching on. We didn't feel we could be successful enough with the coaching with a generic rubric because maybe it just says you displays good critical thinking. But what does that mean to the instructor for this particular assignment? And so we had to say, no, we can't scan and offer feedback based on a Canvas rubric that you've assigned. You can attach a rubric and grade with the rubric via Harmonize that way. We just won't be able to offer the AI feedback because the majority of those rubrics end up being too generic to be able to coach the AI sufficiently to be able to have the feedback be correct enough that we're comfortable showing it to the student. Even though we're not writing anything to the student, we don't want to tell them they did a good job if the instructor wasn't able to clarify enough for us. We're really encouraging instructors to go through this process of just click the buttons to make the rubric because then we will get a much more detailed instructions of what excellent means for critical thinking for this assignment so that we have enough data to be able to coach the AI, therefore to turn around and coach the students. All right. If there's no more questions, I'll go back in and jump into the Bloom's taxonomy stuff because I think that bears a little bit of digging if people are interested in that. Alan, any other questions before I jump back into that?
No, go ahead, Marcus.
I think a lot of so one of the things I want to highlight here is that we're trying to use AI for things that are known to work well. Like we're not trying to push the bounds of personalized tutors, et cetera, because there's not a whole lot of science that says how well those work or not. And you're kind of pushing into a realm where you're experimenting a lot with students, which concerns us. And so the approach we're taking to all of these things is, let's say I was going to rebuild this activity moving it up and down the Bloom's level to make it simpler for my students. We will bring in that existing activity. And the way we are handling this is that we are actually, we're defaulting them to a Bloom's level because we have to pick something and it's applying their knowledge. But if they decided that their students are not quite at the apply level because maybe it went poorly, they could go ahead and bring it in and be like, I want to rebuild this assignment, but I'm going to move it to a simpler level on the Bloom's taxonomy to say basically they need to get back into the basic understanding of this information because when they tried to apply it, it was clear they didn't understand it well enough. And so we can bump it down to that level and say, okay, that is the level we're at now. And then what we do behind the scenes in this regard is that we've coached the AI on here 6 or 7 or I don't know how many, 8 perhaps, different strategies, instructional strategies for engaging students at each of the Bloom's level. And so that's when I will generate, we will pick one of those and show it to the instructor. So we're not trying to create these on the fly. We are just using textbook examples of different strategies that are known to work at these different levels so that we can then march the students up and down them so the instructor can come in and change these as they see fit. All right. Let me see if there's anything else we should go through. Back into my original example here that I had built. Don't think I have anything else to touch on. So let's talk any questions and answers. I guess I'll cover a couple of the logistics things. I don't know if these were covered in the chat or not, but one of the first questions we always get is this training our AI overlords? And the answer is no. We have a contract with ChatGPT 4.0 is what we're using behind the scenes for this. And they cannot keep or train, they can't train their model on any of the data. They can keep the data for like a month to do debugging, but they're not allowed to train their model with this. So that's the underlying model we're doing. And then of course we do a whole bunch of prompt engineering between us and ChatGPT to make sure that it's staying in what we consider ethical rails for what's going on behind the scenes. Also, we never show anything that's written to the student unless the instructor has had a chance to review it to sidestep the hallucinations that happen when they're going through it all. That way we don't have any concern that we're going to send something crazy out into the world. The instructor has their eyes on it. They can edit it. They have that control before they publish it so that whatever is written, they have that final edit and pass through.
And Marcus, we also have a question about auto grading. So maybe that's worth
Gotcha.
touching.
For sure, yeah. So auto grading is, I like to be very specific on this. I'll call it the dumb auto grade. We are doing participation grading automatically. And what that means is we're setting up these multiple due dates for any assignment or discussion. It can be a private assignment where like I want your written self-reflection on Monday, another written self-reflection on Friday, whatever the deadlines are. You tell us what you want out of those from a raw activity perspective. So, hey, I want your first post in by Friday. If it's on time and if it has 300 words, you're going to get the 5 points automatically. And then when you shift into, in this case, peer connectivity mode, I want you to do our standard 2 comments, but those each need to have 50 words reflected of them. So it'll grade based on word counting, timeliness of participation, quantity of participation. That's why I call it a dumb participation grade. We are not trying to take the step of grading the quality for the instructor. We actually set out to see if that was possible. And what we're finding in our research is that it is not close enough. And so instructors should not be grading. Setting aside any human versus AI thing, it's actually not accurate enough to be able to handle grading. And so we are staying away from that to where we are not actually doing a quality-based grade. The closest we get is the feedback to the student to let them self-improve, because we did find it accurate enough that we can point to a part of the rubric and say, could be better, so that they can go through a self-improvement realm, but we are not trying to assign a grade based on quality. What we do see instructors do, which I thought was super fascinating, didn't even occur to me, which is why I love our instructors. They will turn on auto grading and they will turn on the rubric And that way, most students in these formative assignments end up getting an A, be that right or wrong. I don't know. They end up getting an A. The ones that need the specific feedback, the instructor will then come back through with the rubric and grade with the rubric to be able to take away points, because then the student has a very specific indicator of why they lost points. So yes, they hit the raw participation grade, and 80% of the class can stick with that. So the instructor can just flip through and review it. But then the ones that they need to give feedback, they use the rubric to give that feedback to. This rubric coach is just, you're seeing it demo today. It's coming out for our customers in about 3 to 4 weeks. So we're going to be piloting this with a ton of them throughout the fall semester. So the instruction building, the rubric and building is there. The AI rubric coach, that feedback to the students, is coming out in a few weeks. So I don't have how are they going to combine the auto grading with the rubric coach. We'll see what our users do with that as we're going through. We basically have run through a whole bunch of examples with our schools of, here's an activity that was already graded with a rubric. Here's what the rubric coach said, and they do in fact line up. So we're confident enough to be able to tell the students that this is okay. And then we will start to work through with our instructors and with our D coordinators, and what we work pretty heavily with instructional designers, D coordinators, and instructors. That's sort of the level we work at in terms of the school. And then at the assessment level, people are really interested in the rubric creation and being able to link those up into outcomes. We have more rubric use, but so there'll be a lot of more feedback coming of how did that rubric coach perform in the real world, because to the best of my knowledge, no such thing exists yet. So once we get into the classroom, how can we monitor how students use it? How can we monitor what it does for improved outcomes? To be able to see then if students are given real-time AI feedback based on the instructor's rubric, what does it do to the learning process? So we're going to be very intentional about that, work directly with IDs to find use cases to put it into classes and monitor it and take surveys and see what's happening. All right, other questions for us? I see we have about maybe a few minutes left. I need to then hand it back over to Nikki for an outro, but before we do that, any last questions for us to field? Going once, going twice. Alan, take a guess and no.
No,
Right.
maybe worth mentioning about our pilot program if anyone's interested.
Oh, fair point. Yeah, I was all in product mode. So if you want to try this out, we do free pilots. So you can use as many folks as you want in a semester. We'll support you, we'll train you, we'll get you up and rolling. About 83 at last numbers, 83% of people who pilot it actually move forward into full paying customers. We're pretty confident in the tools. We can send you some URLs to play with it as well outside of an LMS, because that way you can just jump in and start to play with some of these tools. So happy to do that. You can hit up all those at our website. Alan threw the URL out there for the pilot page, where you can either ask to meet with us. We'll talk about a fall pilot, get you rolling for that, or if you just want to play with some of the tools here. Like I said, the only thing that's not available right now is the rubric coach. You can play with the activity builder and the rubric builder when you're going into it now. So all of those are available. Like, we really wanted to get our tools into your hands. We're at about 150 institutions now who are using us, from community colleges up to R1s to privates, et cetera. So in a wide variety of schools, and they all use it in a different way, which is what's fascinating about this. Anything else? Oh yeah, David actually threw his email out. David, if you ask for a place just to play around with it, you're going to end up emailing David. So if you want to jump the step and just email David, he put his email address out into the chat, so you can shoot him an email and he'll set you up with a place to play with these tools if you want to get your hands dirty with them as you go through. Nikki, back over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus, so much for, I think, a great presentation. And on behalf of Educause, I want to thank our audience members, our attendees today. We did have a team from Harmonize on board. In addition to Marcus, we had Eric, Alan, and David. So thank you all for helping to field and answer those questions. If you are still on the call and you have not yet filled out our session poll, please do so. We'll leave it up for a second. This is where you can leave us very important feedback. And if you would like to connect with Harmonize, you can leave your contact information there. In addition, you can go back to the course, and there will be on their sheet, there will be an actual space to drop and leave your information there as well. We do look forward to seeing you at our next session at 3 Eastern. And thank you for your participation today.